Picture this: December 1944. A senior examiner from the United States Treasury Department sits in a Paris office, surrounded by seized banking records. His hands are shaking as he reads through the documents. What he has discovered will challenge everything Americans believe about their role in World War II. The records in front of him prove that Chase Bank, one of America's most prestigious financial institutions, actively collaborated with Nazi Germany throughout the war. Not reluctantly, not under duress, eagerly, zealously. The word used in the official Treasury memo was zealously. This examiner will send his findings directly to Treasury Secretary Henry Morgenthau. The memo will be buried. The American public will never learn the full truth. But the documents survive, hidden in archives, waiting for researchers willing to ask uncomfortable questions. Here is what those documents reveal. While American soldiers died on European battlefields, while Jewish families were herded into cattle cars, while the world burned, some of the most powerful banking families in the United States were actively financing the Nazi war machine. This was not a mistake. This was not an accident. This was policy. The names involved read like a who's who of American aristocracy: Rockefeller, Bush, Harriman, Morgan, Ford, Warburg. These families controlled the heights of American finance. They also shared something else. Many of them were members of a secret society at Yale University called Skull and Bones, also known as the Order, also known as Chapter 322. What you are about to discover will fundamentally alter your understanding of World War II, American finance, and the hidden structures of power that continue to shape our world. This is not conspiracy theory. This is documented history, suppressed for 80 years, finally brought to light. We are going to follow the money. We are going to decode the networks. We are going to expose the truth about how American elites built the Third Reich. The story begins not in Berlin, but in New Haven, Connecticut, in a windowless building called the Tomb. Skull and Bones was founded at Yale University in 1833 by William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft. Russell had just returned from Germany, where he had been studying during the height of the Hegelian philosophy movement, sweeping through German universities. He brought back something more than philosophy. He brought back a template for a secret organization. The society was modeled on German secret societies. Its number, 322, referred to the German chapter from which it descended. Its initiation rituals involved lying in a coffin, confessing deepest secrets, and emerging reborn with a new name and lifelong brothers. Members swore absolute secrecy. They denied membership when asked. They helped each other rise to positions of power in government, finance, and intelligence. By the early 20th century, Skull and Bones had penetrated the highest levels of American society. The society's influence extended into Wall Street banking firms, particularly Brown Brothers Harriman. This was the key. Brown Brothers Harriman became the financial nexus connecting American capital to Nazi Germany. The firm was extraordinarily powerful. 9 members of the order worked there simultaneously. Among them were Prescott Bush, father of one president and grandfather of another, and George Herbert Walker, Prescott's father-in-law. These were not junior associates. These were partners. These were the men making decisions about where American capital would flow. In 1924, a German industrialist named Fritz Thyssen was casting about for American financing. Thyssen controlled massive steel production facilities in Germany. He needed capital to expand. More importantly, he was an early financial backer of a rising political figure named Adolf Hitler. Thyssen would later write a book titled I Paid Hitler. The connection between Thyssen and Wall Street was established through Union Banking Corporation. This bank was founded in 1924 by Harriman and the Thyssen interests. Prescott Bush became a director. The bank's primary function was to manage Thyssen's American financial operations and to transfer American capital to Thyssen's German Empire. Union Banking Corporation's office was located at 39 Broadway in Manhattan. This address is important. The same building housed multiple interlocking entities: the Harriman 15 Corporation, the Holland American Trading Corporation, the Seamless Steel Equipment Corporation, all controlled by the same network of Skull and Bones brothers, all moving American money to German industrial operations. By 1933, when Hitler seized power in Germany, these financial channels were already established and flowing. American capital had already built much of Germany's industrial base: the steel, the coal, the chemicals, the infrastructure that would later be turned to war production. Let us be absolutely clear about what this means. The industrial capacity that allowed Nazi Germany to wage war across Europe was substantially built with American money, channeled through American banks, controlled by members of a secret society at Yale University. Treasury Secretary Morgenthau understood this. In 1942, he wrote a memo specifically naming Ford Motor Company and Chase Bank as requiring immediate investigation for their pro-Nazi activities. He wrote, "These two situations convince us that it is imperative to investigate immediately on the spot the activities of subsidiaries of at least some of the larger American firms which were operating in France during German occupation." The Ford connection deserves special attention. Henry Ford was not just an industrialist. He was an ideologue. In 1920, Ford began publishing a newspaper called the Dearborn Independent. For 91 consecutive weeks, this newspaper published virulently anti-Semitic articles. These articles were later compiled into a book titled The International Jew. This book became a bestseller in Germany. Adolf Hitler kept a portrait of Henry Ford in his office. Hitler told a reporter from the Detroit News in 1931, "I regard Henry Ford as my inspiration." Ford was the only American mentioned by name in Hitler's autobiography, Mein Kampf. Ford's relationship with Nazi Germany went far beyond ideological alignment. Ford Motor Company maintained operations in Germany throughout the war. The German subsidiary produced trucks, engines, and other military equipment for the Wehrmacht. When Allied bombers destroyed German Ford plants, they were rebuilt with funds from Dearborn, Michigan. In 1938, Henry Ford accepted the Grand Cross of the German Eagle, the highest honor Nazi Germany could bestow on a foreigner. This was not a symbolic gesture. This was recognition of material support. Ford's biographer later admitted that Ford and his company were instrumental in arming Nazi Germany. But Ford was not alone. Standard Oil of New Jersey, controlled by the Rockefeller family, maintained extensive business relationships with IG Farben, the German chemical conglomerate that produced Zyklon B gas for the death camps. Standard Oil shipped fuel to Nazi Germany even after the United States entered the war. A 1941 intelligence report from the Fifth Corps in Columbus, Ohio, documents this precisely. The report details how Standard Oil had 6 tankers under Panamanian registry, manned by Nazi officers, carrying fuel oil from Standard Oil refineries to the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands served as a refueling base for Nazi submarines attacking Allied shipping. The report notes that while Standard Oil claimed its ships had not been attacked by German submarines, this was false. The MS Frederick S. Fales, owned by Standard Vacuum Company, had been sunk by a German submarine in September 1940. Yet Standard Oil continued shipping fuel to Nazi-controlled ports. Percy Rockefeller was a member of Skull and Bones, initiated in 1900. While Percy was the only Rockefeller to formally join the order, the family maintained extensive connections to the network through banking partnerships and interlocking directorates. Standard Oil's behavior during the war reflected the priorities of this network: profit over patriotism, secret deals over public interest. Chase Bank's collaboration went even further. The bank was linked to the order through multiple directors. Frederick Allen was initiated in 1900. W.E.S. Griswold was initiated in 1899. The Vanderbilt family was represented through multiple members across generations. The bank's president, Winthrop Aldrich, came from the Harvard branch of the Aldrich family, another branch having been initiated at Yale into the order. The December 1944 Treasury examination of Chase Bank's Paris operations revealed the depth of collaboration. The report identified that the bank's Paris manager, a man named Niederman, was unquestionably a collaborator. More damning, Chase's head office in New York knew about this collaboration, but took no action. The report states explicitly, "There is ample evidence to show that the head office in New York viewed Niederman's good relations with the Germans as an excellent means of preserving, unimpaired, the position of the Chase Bank in France." The German authorities were eager to keep Chase Bank operating in occupied France. They took exceptional measures to provide revenue sources. Why? The report explains, the German authorities desired to be friends with the important American banks because they expected that these banks would be useful after the war as an instrument of German policy in the United States. Read that sentence again. German authorities expected American banks would serve as instruments of German policy in the United States after the war. This was not paranoia. This was based on existing relationships. The Germans knew these banks had already served them before and during the conflict. Chase Bank zealously maintained the account of the German embassy in Paris throughout the occupation. The bank's own records note that every little thing helps maintain excellent relations between Chase and German authorities. While French citizens starved under occupation, while resistance fighters were tortured in Gestapo cellars, Chase Bank was helping German authorities manage their finances. The web of connections extends further. RCA essentially a Morgan Rockefeller firm, and therefore linked to the order, maintained business relationships with Nazi Germany throughout the war. Documents record the association. The company prioritized profits over the war effort. The pattern repeats across the American corporate landscape. Wherever you find major wartime collaboration with Nazi Germany, you find connections to the same banking families, the same interlocking directorates, the same secret society memberships. This brings us to the Warburg family, perhaps the most crucial link in the entire network. The Warburg banking consortium stretched across Germany, the Netherlands, England, France, and the United States. Paul Warburg was a partner in Kuhn, Loeb and Company in New York. His brother Max Warburg headed the Warburg banking consortium in Germany and the Netherlands. Paul Warburg was the principal architect of the Federal Reserve System. In November 1910, he attended the secret meeting at Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia, where the Federal Reserve Act was drafted. The other attendees represented the Morgan and Rockefeller interests. Many had connections to Skull and Bones. All represented the same elite banking network. The creation of the Federal Reserve gave this network control over the American money supply. It also gave them the ability to direct American capital flows internationally with minimal oversight. When the Fed opened for business in 1914, just as World War I began, it provided the mechanism for financing that war. And 25 years later, it would provide the mechanism for financing the next one. Paul Warburg's role in creating the Fed has been described by his biographer, Harold Kellogg, in revealing terms. Paul M. Warburg is probably the mildest-mannered man that ever personally conducted a revolution. It was a bloodless revolution. He did not attempt to rouse the populace to arms. He stepped forth armed simply with an idea, and he conquered. This conquest gave the banking elite unprecedented power over American finance. It also gave them the tools to pursue their dialectical strategy. This strategy, rooted in the Hegelian philosophy that William Huntington Russell brought back from Germany in 1832, involved a simple principle: control both sides of every conflict. If you can finance both sides of a war, you always win. You win economically through loans and interest. You win politically through influence over both victors and vanquished. You win strategically by shaping the post-war order. This is not speculation. This is documented Skull and Bones philosophy, openly discussed in research on the order. The order's penetration of American intelligence services ensured their strategy could be executed without interference. The Office of Strategic Services, predecessor to the CIA, was heavily staffed with order members. Wild Bill Donovan, who founded the OSS, worked closely with order members throughout his career. The intelligence apparatus that should have been investigating American support for Nazi Germany was controlled by the same network providing that support. Consider the implications. The Treasury Department investigation that exposed Chase Bank's collaboration was conducted by civil servants, not intelligence operatives. Morgenthau himself was not part of the elite network. He was a Roosevelt loyalist who took his duties seriously. That is why his investigation was suppressed. That is why the American public never learned these facts. After the war, many of these relationships continued uninterrupted. Operation Paperclip brought Nazi scientists to America, where they were integrated into the military-industrial complex. Who facilitated these transfers? Many of the same banking families and corporate entities that had financed the Third Reich in the first place. The continuity is striking. Allen Dulles, who would become CIA director, spent the war years in Switzerland managing intelligence operations. He also maintained contact with German industrialists and financiers, many of whom had business relationships with the American firms we have discussed. After the war, Dulles ensured that many of these German partners avoided prosecution at Nuremberg. The Dulles brothers, Alan and John Foster, were partners at Sullivan and Cromwell, a Wall Street law firm that represented many German companies in the United States during the 1930s. Their clients included I.G. Farben. When questions arose about whether they should continue representing German clients after Hitler came to power, the Dulles brothers chose profit over principle. John Foster Dulles would become Secretary of State under Eisenhower. Allen Dulles would head the CIA. Together, they would shape American foreign policy during the Cold War. Their worldview was formed in the crucible of these pre-war and wartime business relationships. The dialectic continued. The same families that financed Hitler would now position themselves as cold warriors against communism. Prescott Bush's career followed a similar trajectory. Despite his documented role in financing Nazi Germany through Union Banking Corporation, he faced no prosecution. Instead, he became a senator from Connecticut, serving from 1952 to 1963. His son would become president. His grandson would become president. The family's power grew rather than diminished. In October 1942, the United States government finally took action against Union Banking Corporation. The bank was seized under the Trading with the Enemy Act. The seizure order, signed by Leo Crowley, the alien property custodian, identified the bank as holding funds for Fritz Thyssen. The order stated explicitly that Thyssen was an enemy national. This seizure should have been a major scandal. A sitting director of a major Wall Street bank had been financing Hitler. Instead, the story barely made the newspapers. The seizure was presented as a routine wartime measure. The full extent of the relationships, the networks, the intentional nature of the financing was suppressed. Why was it suppressed? Because exposure would have revealed that much of the American elite, across multiple industries and institutions, had been complicit. It would have shown that the war was more complex than the simple narrative of democracy versus fascism. It would have exposed the dialectical strategy at the heart of elite power. The order operated on a principle: control both sides of the ideological spectrum, fund both left and right, support both revolution and reaction. Why? Because conflict drives change, and by controlling both sides, you control the direction of change. The financing of Nazi Germany was not aberrant. It was consistent with the deeper philosophy guiding these elite networks. Anthony Sutton, the historian who exposed much of Skull and Bones's activities, explained this principle clearly. He wrote, "The order believes the opposite to most of us. That is crucial to understanding what they are about. Any discussion between left and right, while essential to promote change, is never allowed to develop into a discussion along the lines of Jeffersonian democracy. The discussion and the funding is always towards more state power, use of state power, and away from individual rights. This philosophy explains why the same banking families that backed the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia also financed the Nazi rise in Germany. Both movements promised state power over individual liberty. Both promised centralized control. Both represented opportunities for the banking elite to profit and to shape the emerging world order. The Harriman family exemplifies this approach. Averell Harriman, Skull and Bones initiate, served as U.S. ambassador to the Soviet Union during World War II. His family bank financed Nazi Germany. The contradiction is only apparent. From the perspective of the order, there was no contradiction. Both fascism and communism advanced their agenda of centralized power. This brings us to a crucial document from 1933, just as Hitler was consolidating power. A researcher named Shoup published a book titled Hitler's Secret Backers. This book, published when these events were current, names specific banks and bankers financing Hitler. Decades later, when captured German documents were declassified through Project Dustbin, they confirmed Shoup's research. Shoup identified the bank for Handel and Scheepvaart in Rotterdam as a key conduit. This bank was controlled by Fritz Thyssen. When Project Dustbin documents were analyzed, investigators discovered that out of 8 directors of this bank, 6 were either Nazis or members of the order. The overlap was not coincidental. The bank's directors included Ellery S. James and Prescott S. Bush, both partners in Brown Brothers Harriman. They were also both members of Skull and Bones. The evidence trail leads directly from the tomb at Yale to the boardrooms of banks financing Nazi expansion to Hitler's war machine. The documents reveal one more crucial detail. The Bank von Haidt, which preceded the Thyssen Bank, was identified by Shoup as the intermediary from Guarantee Trust in New York to Hitler between 1930 and 1933. Guarantee Trust was controlled by Morgan interests, which connected to the order through multiple partnerships and family ties. Think about what this means. In 1933, when Shoup published his research, he identified specific banks and intermediaries based on sources available at that time. 20 years later, when German documents captured during the war were finally declassified, they confirmed every detail. The conspiracy was not theoretical. It was documented. It was real. The scope of this network extended beyond finance into industry, media, and government. The order had penetrated every sector necessary to execute their strategy. In law, firms like Lord, Day, and Lord were dominated by order members. In media, Henry Luce of Time Life, William Buckley of National Review, and executives at major newspapers were initiated brothers. This media control ensured favorable coverage or strategic silence. When Union Banking Corporation was seized, the story was buried. When Treasury investigations revealed Chase Bank collaboration, the reports remained classified. The American people were never told that their elite had financed both sides of the greatest conflict in human history. The question must be asked, did they know? Did Prescott Bush know he was financing Hitler? Did the Chase Bank executives know they were collaborating with Nazis? Did the Standard Oil managers know their fuel was powering German submarines that sank Allied ships? The evidence suggests they knew exactly what they were doing and believed they could operate with impunity. A 1926 incident illuminates their mentality. A group of bankers were sitting at a table in a Washington hotel discussing Federal Reserve policy. One banker, described as having a world-famous name, was asked whether low discount rates might encourage speculation. He replied, "Yes, they will, but that cannot be helped. It is the price we must pay for helping Europe." The banker was almost certainly JP Morgan Jr., known as Jack. This casual admission reveals the mindset. European recovery, meaning preservation of their banking interests abroad, took priority over American economic stability. Speculation, stock bubbles, eventual crashes were acceptable costs for maintaining their international network. This same mentality drove the support for Nazi Germany. These bankers saw themselves as operating above national loyalties. They were citizens of a financial empire that transcended borders. American democracy, European fascism, Soviet communism were simply different management systems for the populations they controlled. Their loyalty was to their class, their network, their order. The initiation rituals at Skull and Bones were designed to create this mindset. New members lay in a coffin and confess their deepest secrets to their fellow initiates. These confessions create leverage, ensuring lifetime loyalty. They emerge from the coffin reborn with a new identity. Their primary loyalty is now to the Brotherhood, not to nation or constitution. This explains how American elites could finance Hitler while American soldiers fought Nazi armies. Their brotherhood bonds superseded patriotic duty. Their financial interests outweighed moral considerations. Their long-term vision of managed global order justified supporting even the most evil regime of the 20th century. As part one of this investigation closes, we have established the networks, traced the money flows, and identified the key players. We have seen how a secret society at Yale University created the financial and industrial foundation that allowed Nazi Germany to wage war. We have documented the suppression of this history by the same networks that created it. In part two, we will examine the full extent of this collaboration during the war years. We will explore how these relationships shaped the post-war order. We will reveal the occult dimensions of these elite networks and their continuing influence today. We will show how understanding this hidden history illuminates our present reality. The story does not end in 1945. The bloodlines continue. The networks persist. The game continues. The full scope of wartime collaboration extends far beyond the banking sector. To understand the true depth of American elite involvement with Nazi Germany, we must examine the industrial complex, the intelligence operations, and most critically, the occult dimension that bound these networks together. By 1941, when the United States officially entered World War II, the industrial foundation of Nazi Germany had been substantially built with American capital and expertise. But the support did not stop. Despite declarations of war, despite public patriotism, the financial flows continued through elaborate subterfuge. General Motors, controlled by the DuPont family, maintained operations in Germany throughout the war. The Opel subsidiary produced trucks, armored vehicles, and airplane engines for the Wehrmacht. When Allied intelligence discovered that GM's German operations were supporting the Nazi war effort, the information was classified. The reason was simple. Too many powerful families would be implicated. The DuPont family represented old American aristocracy with extensive connections to political power. Exposing their wartime profiteering would raise uncomfortable questions about other elite families doing the same thing. ITT Corporation, headed by Sosthenes Bain, provides perhaps the most egregious example. ITT owned a substantial stake in Focke-Wulf, the German aircraft manufacturer that produced fighter planes for the Luftwaffe. These planes shot down Allied aircraft. American technology and capital were literally being used to kill American pilots. Bain maintained contact with ITT's German operations throughout the war. He traveled to neutral countries to meet with German business partners. He coordinated through Swiss banking channels. The US government knew about these activities, but took no action. Bain had too many connections in Washington. He was too well protected by the network. The protection extended through multiple layers. Corporate lawyers at firms like Sullivan and Cromwell, where the Dulles brothers practiced, structured these arrangements to provide legal cover. If questioned, they could claim they were merely managing existing investments, fulfilling contractual obligations, protecting shareholder value. But the reality was darker. These were not passive investments. These were active partnerships. American executives provided technical expertise. They shared patents and industrial processes. They coordinated production schedules. They were, in effect, working for both sides simultaneously. The aluminum industry exemplifies this coordination. Alcoa, the Aluminum Company of America, had a cartel agreement with IG Farben controlling global aluminum production. Aluminum was essential for aircraft construction. The cartel agreement limited American aluminum production, creating artificial scarcity, while ensuring German aluminum supplies remained adequate. During the war, American aircraft production was constrained by aluminum shortages. At the same time, German aircraft production continued unimpeded. The connection was not coincidental. The cartel agreement, established before the war, continued to shape production during it. Senator Harry Truman, before becoming vice president, chaired a committee investigating war production. His committee discovered these cartel arrangements. They found that American industrial capacity was being deliberately limited to maintain market arrangements with German competitors. The findings were explosive. They were also suppressed. Why suppressed? Because the implications were too dangerous. If the American public learned that shortages of critical war materials were caused by businessmen maintaining profit agreements with the enemy, the resulting outrage would threaten the entire corporate establishment. The occult dimension of these networks provides the key to understanding how such betrayal was possible. Skull and Bones was not merely a networking club. It was a secret society with esoteric rituals, occult symbolism, and a world-view fundamentally at odds with democratic values. The Society's founding documents describe it as Chapter 322 of a German secret society. The number 322 has occult significance. Some researchers connect it to the date March 22nd, others to numerological meanings in Germanic occultism. The Society itself has never publicly explained the designation. The Tomb, the Society's headquarters at Yale, is a windowless stone building filled with occult symbolism. Skulls line the walls. The ritual chamber contains a grandfather clock, permanently stopped at 8 o'clock. Members gather for ceremonies on Thursday and Sunday nights. What occurs during these ceremonies remains secret, known only to initiates. Former members who have broken their silence describe rituals involving sexual content, death symbolism, and rebirth imagery. Initiates lie naked in a coffin, while other members stand around chanting. They confess their sexual history in explicit detail. They emerge from the coffin reborn as members of the Brotherhood. These rituals serve multiple functions. They create intense bonding through shared transgression. They provide blackmail material, ensuring lifetime loyalty. They psychologically separate members from conventional morality. They create a sense of being part of an elite above normal rules and laws. This psychological conditioning explains how members could betray their country without apparent guilt. They had undergone a ritual death and rebirth. Their true identity was now as a member of the Order. Their true loyalty was to their brotherhood. National allegiance was secondary, a convenient fiction for public consumption. The connection to Germanic occultism runs deeper than the society's organizational structure. Many Order members were fascinated by Teutonic mythology, Norse symbolism, and German philosophical traditions. This was not casual interest. This was a deliberate cultivation of Germanic cultural identity among American elites. William Huntington Russell brought back more than Hegelian philosophy from Germany. He brought back an occult worldview that saw history as driven by hidden forces, guided by enlightened elites, moving toward a predetermined synthesis. This view justified any action in service of the historical process. The Hegelian dialectic became the operational philosophy of the Order. Thesis and antithesis must clash to create synthesis. Therefore, fund both thesis and antithesis. Support both capitalism and communism. Finance both democracy and fascism. The conflict produces the synthesis you desire. From this perspective, supporting Nazi Germany made perfect sense. Nazism represented the antithesis to democratic capitalism. The inevitable conflict would produce a new world order. The Order would control both sides, and therefore control the outcome. The human cost was irrelevant. History required the sacrifice. This philosophy was explicitly occult. It drew on hermetic traditions of transformation through conflict. It referenced alchemical processes of dissolution and coagulation. It employed the language of mystery schools and secret societies. The Order saw themselves as adepts guiding humanity's evolution. The Masonic connections reinforced this occult dimension. Many Order members were also Freemasons, often of high degree. The interlocking memberships created a network bound by multiple oath structures and ritual obligations. These were not social clubs. These were initiatic orders with serious spiritual commitments. Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, the 19th century Masonic text, outlines a worldview strikingly similar to the Order's philosophy. Pike describes Masonry as teaching that the state must dominate the individual, that conflict drives progress, that enlightened elites must guide the masses. The parallels are not coincidental. Prescott Bush was not only a member of Skull and Bones. He was also connected to Masonic networks through business partnerships. George Herbert Walker, his father-in-law, maintained relationships with high-degree Masons in financial circles. These overlapping initiations created bonds stronger than mere business relationships. The wartime collaboration must be understood in this context. When Prescott Bush financed Hitler through Union Banking Corporation, he was not simply pursuing profit. He was executing a strategy developed within these occult networks. He was playing his assigned role in a larger drama. The same applies to the Rockefeller support through Standard Oil, the Morgan support through banking channels, the Harriman support through industrial investments. These were not independent business decisions. These were coordinated actions within a network bound by occult oaths and esoteric philosophy. After the war, this network moved seamlessly into building the Cold War architecture. The same men who financed Hitler now positioned themselves as defenders against Soviet communism. The Council on Foreign Relations, founded in 1921, became the primary vehicle for this transition. The CFR was established by order members returning from the Paris Peace Conference after World War I. They were disappointed that America had not joined the League of Nations. They created the CFR to ensure American participation in future global governance structures. By 1945, the CFR was the most influential foreign policy organization in America. Its membership included corporate executives, bankers, academics, and government officials. Many were members of Skull and Bones. Many more were connected through the broader elite network. The CFR's role in shaping post-war policy cannot be overstated. The United Nations was substantially designed by CFR members. The World Bank and International Monetary Fund reflected CFR priorities. The Marshall Plan was drafted by CFR committees. The entire architecture of American global power was built by this network. Here is the crucial point. The same network that financed Nazi Germany now controlled post-war reconstruction. They financed the destruction, then financed the rebuilding. They profited from both. More importantly, they shaped the emerging world order according to their vision. Alan Dulles exemplifies this continuity. During the 1930s, his law firm represented German corporations, including IG Farben. During the war, he ran intelligence operations from Switzerland, maintaining contact with German industrialists. After the war, as CIA director, he protected those same industrialists from prosecution. Operation Paperclip, which brought Nazi scientists to America, was overseen by intelligence officials connected to this network. Werner von Braun, who built Hitler's Phi-2 rockets using slave labor, became the hero of NASA's space program. His past was whitewashed. His crimes were forgotten. He was useful to the network. Thousands of Nazi scientists, intelligence operatives, and technical experts were similarly absorbed into American institutions. They brought with them not just expertise, but ideology. The same totalitarian mindset that had served Hitler now served the American national security state. The justification was always anti-communism, but the deeper agenda was building a managed global order. The Cold War provided the perfect dialectic: capitalism versus communism, America versus the Soviet Union, thesis versus antithesis. The synthesis would be global governance controlled by the elite network. The Bilderberg Group, founded in 1954, formalized this agenda. The group brings together American and European elites annually for secret meetings. No press is allowed. No minutes are published. The discussions shape policy across the Western world. The Bilderberg Steering Committee has been consistently dominated by individuals connected to the networks we have traced. David Rockefeller was a longtime member. Henry Kissinger, a protege of the Rockefeller family, was a regular attendee. European representatives included individuals from the same banking dynasties that had financed both world wars. Peter Rupert, Lord Carrington, who chaired the Bilderberg Group for many years, was also a director of Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation, controlled by the Rothschild family. The interlocking directorates continued across generations. The same families maintained control through carefully managed succession. William Bundy, Skull and Bones class of 1939, became a permanent steering committee member of Bilderberg. His brother McGeorge Bundy, Skull and Bones class of 1940, served as national security advisor to Kennedy and Johnson. The Bundy brothers controlled what information reached American presidents during crucial Cold War decisions. This level of control extended throughout the government. The intelligence agencies were particularly penetrated. The CIA's founding generation included numerous order members. The agency's covert operations often served network interests rather than clear national security objectives. The Bay of Pigs invasion, the overthrow of Mossadegh in Iran, the coup against Allende in Chile. These operations protected corporate interests of network members. United Fruit Company in Guatemala, oil companies in Iran, copper companies in Chile. The CIA functioned as an armed branch of American corporate power. Domestically, the network controlled policy through foundation funding. The Rockefeller Foundation, Carnegie Endowment, Ford Foundation. These institutions funded academic research, shaped university curricula, and determined which ideas entered mainstream discourse. Educational control was critical to maintaining power across generations. Yale University itself served as a recruitment ground. Promising young men were identified, initiated into Skull and Bones, and groomed for leadership positions. The cycle repeated every year, ensuring fresh initiates entered the network. The symbolism was everywhere for those who knew how to read it. Corporate logos contained Masonic symbols. Government buildings incorporated occult architecture. The dollar bill displayed the pyramid and all-seeing eye. These symbols served multiple functions. For the uninitiated, they were meaningless decorations. For initiates, they were recognition signals, affirmations of hidden power. For the occultly aware but unconnected, they were warnings, demonstrations of reach and influence. The symbolism operated on multiple levels simultaneously. The financing of Hitler must be understood as part of this larger pattern. It was not an aberration. It was consistent with the network's modus operandi across the 20th century. Fund both sides, manage the conflict, shape the outcome, profit from the chaos. The human cost was never a consideration. Millions died in World War II. Millions more died in the Cold War proxy conflict. The elite network viewed these deaths as necessary sacrifices to historical progress. They were adepts of what some researchers call the alchemy of ritual murder. Michael Hoffman, in his research on secret societies and psychological warfare, argues that these conflicts function as mass rituals. The violence is broadcast globally through media, creating a psychic impact on the collective unconscious. The elite network performs ritual magic at the scale of nations. Whether one accepts this occult interpretation or prefers a purely materialist analysis, the pattern remains clear. The same families profited from every major conflict of the 20th century. They financed all sides. They sold weapons to all combatants. They rebuilt what they had destroyed. The Iraq Wars provide a contemporary example. George H.W. Bush, Skull and Bones class of 1948, launched the first Gulf War. His son, George W. Bush, Skull and Bones class of 1968, launched the second. The family maintained control across 2 generations. The corporate beneficiaries were predictable. Halliburton, where Dick Cheney had been CEO. Bechtel, where George Shultz and Caspar Weinberger held positions. The same network, recycling the same playbook, creating the same outcomes. War as business, business as ritual, ritual as control. The continuity is the key to understanding power. Families persist across generations. Networks maintain cohesion through intermarriage. Secret societies ensure loyalty through ritual bonding. The architecture of control remains stable even as individual actors change. The Bush family dynasty illustrates this perfectly. Prescott Bush financed Hitler. George H.W. Bush ran the CIA and became president. George W. Bush followed as president. Jeb Bush attempted to continue the dynasty. 3 generations of power rooted in Skull and Bones membership. The Rockefeller dynasty shows even longer continuity. John D. Rockefeller Sr. built Standard Oil through ruthless monopoly practices. His son distributed the wealth through foundations, buying influence and shaping discourse. The grandchildren maintained control through banking and politics. The family remains powerful in the 21st century. These dynasties do not maintain power through competence or merit. They maintain power through control of capital, control of institutions, control of information, and control of the symbolic order. They operate at levels most people never perceive. The occult dimension is not incidental, it is central. The rituals at Skull and Bones, the Masonic degrees, the membership in esoteric orders, these create psychological bonds stronger than ordinary loyalty. They create a sense of cosmic mission, of historical destiny, of participation in forces beyond the mundane. When Prescott Bush lay in the coffin at his Skull and Bones initiation, when he confessed his secrets, when he swore his oaths, he was not simply joining a club. He was being inducted into a world view. That world view said the Brotherhood transcends nation. It said elites have the right to rule. It said deception of the masses is necessary and justified. From within that world view, financing Hitler was not treason. It was strategy. It was playing both sides of a necessary conflict. It was executing the Hegelian dialectic. The deaths of millions were the price of historical progress toward the synthesis, toward the New World Order. This phrase, New World Order, appears repeatedly in the statements of network members. George H.W. Bush used it openly in speeches. David Rockefeller wrote about it in his memoirs. Henry Kissinger discussed it in his academic work. They were not hiding their agenda. They believed their position was unassailable. The arrogance reflects their sense of operating beyond accountability. Who would prosecute them? The Justice Department was staffed by lawyers from firms that served the network. The Congress was funded by their campaign contributions. The media was controlled by corporations they owned or influenced. The system was designed to protect them. The Treasury Department investigation that exposed Chase Bank's wartime collaboration illustrates this protection. The evidence was documented. The crimes were clear. Yet no prosecutions followed. The reports were classified. The story was buried. Henry Morgenthau, who ordered the investigation, left office, and his work was forgotten. Prescott Bush faced no consequences for his role with Union Banking Corporation. He became a senator. His family became a political dynasty. The lesson was clear. Elite privilege means immunity. The rules that govern ordinary citizens do not apply at the highest levels. This immunity persists today. The financial crisis of 2008 was caused by the same banking families we have traced through this investigation. They crashed the global economy through reckless speculation. They were bailed out with taxpayer money. None went to prison. The cycle continued. The continuity from Nazi financing to contemporary financial crimes reveals the core truth. There is a class of people who operate above the law, who see themselves as masters of history, who believe their right to rule derives from occult knowledge and elite bloodlines. They intermarry to preserve this bloodline. The Bush family intermarried with the Walker family. The Rockefellers intermarried with the Aldrich family. The Harrimans intermarried across multiple elite families. This is not romantic coincidence. This is deliberate preservation of power and wealth within a closed network. Fritz Springmeier's research on Illuminati bloodlines documents this pattern across 13 core families: Rockefeller, Rothschild, Bundy, Russell, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Astor, and others. These families control vast wealth. More importantly, they control the institutions that shape society. The Federal Reserve, still controlled by private banking interests, determines monetary policy. The Council on Foreign Relations shapes foreign policy. The Trilateral Commission coordinates between America, Europe, and Japan. The Bilderberg Group provides the venue for elite coordination. These are not democratic institutions. These are mechanisms of elite control. The question becomes, what can be done? The network is so entrenched, so powerful, so protected, that resistance seems futile. But awareness is the first step. Understanding how the system works, who benefits, what agenda is being pursued, this knowledge erodes their power. Their greatest weapon is invisibility. When people believe democracy is real, when they trust institutions, when they accept the official narratives, the elite can operate freely. But when people understand they are being managed, when they see the hidden hands, when they recognize the manipulation, resistance becomes possible. The exposure of Nazi financing is crucial because it reveals the pattern. These elites will betray any principle, support any evil, sacrifice any number of lives in pursuit of their agenda. Patriotism is a tool for controlling the masses, not a value the elite share. Democracy is a facade, not a reality. The documents we have examined, the Treasury reports on Chase Bank, the seizure orders for Union Banking Corporation, the intelligence reports on Standard Oil, these prove the collaboration was real. It was not conspiracy theory. It was documented conspiracy. The suppression of this history was equally real. The American public was never told that their elite financed the enemy. The history books glossed over the financial networks behind the war. The mythology of the greatest generation obscured the betrayal of the ruling class. This mythology serves a purpose. It maintains faith in institutions. It prevents questions about elite loyalty. It ensures each new generation accepts the system they inherit. Breaking the mythology is essential to breaking the control. The occult dimension adds another layer. Most people dismiss occultism as superstition, but the elite take it seriously. They practice rituals. They believe in hidden forces. They structure their operations according to occult calendars and numerological systems. Whether the occultism is real or simply a control mechanism, it shapes their behavior. Understanding this helps explain actions that seem irrational from a conventional perspective. Why would American elites finance Hitler? Because the conflict served their occult agenda. Why do they use esoteric symbolism openly? Because they believe it channels power and demonstrates dominance. The researcher must be willing to examine these uncomfortable dimensions. The purely materialist analysis misses crucial aspects of how elite networks function. The purely occult analysis can become ungrounded speculation. The truth integrates both perspectives. These families believe they have a divine right to rule. They trace their lineage back to ancient priest-kings. They practice rituals they claim connect them to supernatural forces. They see the masses as cattle to be managed. This worldview, however delusional, drives their actions. When Prescott Bush took his skull and bones oath, he was entering a tradition that, according to researchers, extends back through Illuminati networks in Bavaria, through Masonic lodges in London, through mystery schools in the ancient world. Whether this lineage is historically accurate matters less than the fact that initiates believe it. This belief creates a sense of mission beyond personal gain. The initiate sees himself as part of a multi-generational project. His life is one chapter in a longer story. Sacrifices in the present serve victories in the future. This long-term perspective explains the network's patience and persistence. The financing of Hitler was one operation in a century-long campaign. The creation of the Federal Reserve was another. The founding of the United Nations was another. Each advanced the agenda incrementally. Each moved the world closer to centralized global governance. Today's manifestations include digital currencies controlled by central banks, social credit systems modeled on Chinese totalitarianism, and public-private partnerships that blur the line between government and corporation. The techniques evolve, but the goal remains constant. Total information awareness, total social control, total elite dominance. The COVID-19 pandemic response revealed how far the infrastructure has developed. Government mandates coordinated globally, corporate media enforcing single narratives, technology platforms censoring dissent, financial systems excluding non-compliant citizens. The pieces are in place. Whether one sees COVID as a natural pandemic or an engineered crisis matters less than recognizing how it was used. The same elite networks we have traced strengthened their position. Wealth concentrated further upward. Corporate power expanded, government authority increased, individual liberty contracted. The pattern repeats because the underlying structure persists. The same families control the central banks. The same networks control the major corporations. The same secret societies initiate new generations of elite servants. The financing of Hitler was not an endpoint. It was a waypoint. Understanding this history equips us to recognize contemporary operations. When we see the same families backing all sides in a conflict, we know the game. When we see crisis leading to centralization of power, we know the strategy. When we see occult symbolism in major events, we know the players. The goal of this investigation has been to document the truth and to pierce the veil of secrecy protecting elite power. The documents prove American elites financed Nazi Germany. The networks connecting those elites persist today. The agenda they serve continues to unfold. What happens next depends on whether enough people wake up to reality. The elite derive their power from our ignorance and compliance. The more we understand their methods, the less effective those methods become. The more we refuse to participate in their dialectical conflicts, the harder they must work to maintain control. This is not a call to violence or illegal action. This is a call to awareness, to research, to discussion, to peaceful resistance. The truth is our greatest weapon. The elite fear exposure above all else. That is why they suppress this history. That is why they control education and media. That is why they attack researchers and whistleblowers. But the truth has power beyond their control. Documents survive. Witnesses speak. Patterns emerge. The hidden history can be recovered and shared. Each person who learns this truth can share it with others. The awakening spreads organically, beyond the elite's ability to contain. The financing of Hitler by American elites represents one of the great suppressed truths of the 20th century. It reveals the nature of the power structure that still dominates the world. It exposes the willingness of that structure to sacrifice millions for its agenda. It demonstrates that patriotism and morality are tools they use to control us, not values they live by themselves. We honor the millions who died in World War II by telling the truth about who financed their killers. We honor them by exposing the networks that profit from war. We honor them by refusing to be manipulated into future conflicts that serve elite interests rather than human welfare. The investigation concludes, but the research continues. The networks are vast. The connections multiply. Each thread leads to new revelations. The goal is not to achieve perfect understanding. The goal is to see enough of the pattern to stop being fooled by it. The elite have played this game for centuries. They have refined their methods through trial and error. They have built institutions to perpetuate their power across generations. But they remain a tiny minority. Their power depends on our ignorance and acquiescence. When we understand the game, we can refuse to play. This is the deeper revelation of the method. They show us what they are doing, encoded in symbols and rituals, because they believe exposure strengthens the magic. But awareness can also break the spell. When enough people see the manipulation, it loses its power. The history of Skull and Bones financing Hitler is not just history. It is a lens for understanding current events. It is a map of the hidden architecture of power. It is proof that the official narratives are lies designed to manage us. Take this knowledge forward, research further, share widely, discuss openly. The truth is our liberation. The elite's greatest weakness is their need for secrecy. Expose them and they lose. Wake others up and their control slips. Build networks of aware people and the game changes. The families who financed Hitler still rule. Their descendants occupy positions of power. Their agenda advances. But it is not inevitable. It is not unstoppable. It requires our consent, our participation, our ignorance. Withdraw these and the structure collapses. History is not the deterministic process the Hegelians claim. It is shaped by human choice and action. Understanding how we have been manipulated frees us to make different choices. Seeing the hidden hands allows us to reject their guidance. Knowing the truth restores our agency. This investigation has traced the money from Wall Street to Hitler, exposed the networks that made it possible, revealed the occult dimensions binding those networks, and shown how the same structure persists today. The rest is up to you. Research, learn, share, resist. The truth shall set you free.